Claire was not a morning person. Most days she dragged herself out of bed after the alarm rang 3 times. But on this particular winter morning, she woke before sunrise. Something had stirred her from sleep. Something faint, yet sharp enough to break through her dreams. She lay in bed for a moment, her breath slow and uneven, trying to figure out what had pulled her awake. Then she heard it again, a faint clink, like a cup being placed on a counter. Her eyes shot open. The sound was coming from the kitchen. Her first thought was logical. Maybe she had forgotten to put something away, and it had shifted on its own. But the noise wasn't random. It came again, followed by the soft scrape of a chair leg across the floor. Claire sat up, her heart pounding. Someone was in her kitchen. She grabbed the robe draped over her chair and pulled it tight around her, her bare feet brushing against the cold wooden floor. Every step toward the door felt heavier than the last. She thought about calling the police, but then hesitated. She hadn't heard a break-in. No shattering glass, no door forced open. What if she was overreacting? Still, fear prickled at her skin as she reached the end of the hallway. The glow of early morning light seeped through the half-open blinds in the living room. She paused, listening closely. There it was again, the shuffle of movement, deliberate and calm, as though whoever it was didn't think they were intruding at all. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she turned the corner and looked into the kitchen. Standing there, with his back to her, was Daniel, her neighbor. For a second, her mind refused to process what she was seeing. Daniel, tall and broad-shouldered, was setting something on the counter. A tray of pastries. Next to it, he placed a small jar of honey and 2 mugs. He looked completely at ease, as if he belonged in her kitchen, as if he had done this 100 times before. Claire froze. Relief washed over her that it wasn't a stranger or something dangerous, but it was quickly replaced by confusion and irritation. What was he doing here? Why had he walked into her house uninvited? She must have made a sound, because Daniel turned around suddenly, his eyes wide, before softening into a sheepish smile. "Claire," he said gently. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." She crossed her arms, her heart still racing. "Daniel, what are you doing in my kitchen?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. He raised his hands slightly, like he was surrendering. "I knocked. Twice. Maybe you didn't hear me. The door wasn't locked, so I thought it would be okay." Claire blinked, stunned. "Okay? To just walk into my house at 6 in the morning?" "I know," he admitted, running a hand through his hair nervously. "It sounds bad. But I had this idea. I picked up pastries from that little bakery down the street. You mentioned last week that you liked their cinnamon rolls, remember? I thought maybe we could have breakfast together. I just wanted to surprise you." For a moment, Claire just stared at him. She didn't know whether to laugh, scold him, or thank him. A part of her wanted to tell him to leave immediately. Another part of her couldn't ignore the way her chest tightened at his thoughtfulness. Nobody had brought her breakfast in years. Not since her marriage had ended. Her expression softened despite herself. "You scared me half to death," she murmured, letting out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice quiet, sincere. "I just wanted to do something nice for you." The room felt strange, now familiar, yet charged with something unspoken. Claire glanced at the tray on the counter. The smell of warm pastry drifted through the air, mixing with the faint aroma of coffee grounds he had already pulled from her cupboard. She realized how easily he moved around her space. Natural it looked for him to stand there in her kitchen, as if it belonged to him too. She leaned against the doorway, still unsure how to feel. Daniel had always been too kind, she sometimes thought. He had helped her shovel snow last winter, when the storm had piled her driveway high. He had carried her groceries more than once when her arms were too full. He always asked how she was doing, always lingered a little longer in conversation than necessary. Claire had noticed, of course, that she had never let herself think much about it until now. Seeing him here, with pastries and mugs and that soft look in his eyes, made something stir inside her that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. It was unsettling. It was comforting. It was both at once. Daniel must have sensed her hesitation, because he gave a small smile and said, "If you want me to go, I'll go. I just thought you might like a little company this morning." Claire pressed her lips together, her mind racing. She wanted to tell him off for crossing a line, but she also didn't want him to leave. Her house had felt empty for so long, the silence echoing through every room. And now, for the first time in ages, someone was here, filling it with warmth. Finally, she exhaled and stepped into the kitchen. "Well," she said softly, "since you've already gone through the trouble, we might as well have breakfast." Daniel's shoulders relaxed and relief flashed across his face. He gave a small nod, his smile returning, brighter this time. "Great," he said. "I'll make the coffee." Claire watched him move, pulling out the mugs, pouring water, preparing everything like he had done it before. And maybe he hadn't, but he carried himself like he belonged there. She tried to ignore the way her heart beat faster, the way the quiet morning now seemed to hum with possibility. Something had shifted, and Claire knew, even then, that this was only the beginning. The smell of freshly brewed coffee soon filled the air, blending with the warm scent of cinnamon rolls. Claire sat at the edge of the table, her robe still pulled tightly around her, watching Daniel move around the kitchen with ease. He poured steaming coffee into the mugs and added a splash of cream the way she liked it, without even asking. That small detail surprised her. She wondered how many tiny things he had quietly noticed about her over the months without her realizing. Set the mug in front of her and slid the plate of pastries between them. "These were still warm when I picked them up," he said softly, almost as if trying to make up for the strange way their morning had begun. Claire lifted her eyes to him, noticing how carefully he avoided meeting her gaze for too long. He seemed nervous, like a schoolboy caught sneaking into class late, and it made her lips curve into an involuntary smile. She picked up one of the pastries and broke off a piece. The sweetness melted on her tongue, and for a second, she forgot all about her irritation. "This is really good," she admitted. Daniel let out a quiet laugh of relief. "So I'm forgiven. At least a little." She raised an eyebrow. "Don't push it." But her tone was lighter now, and he caught it. For a few minutes they ate in silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater and the occasional clink of a fork against the plate. Claire tried to focus on the pastry in front of her, but her mind kept drifting to the man across the table. She couldn't ignore how natural this felt, sharing breakfast like this, as though it were an ordinary morning. It had been years since she had shared a meal with anyone at her kitchen table. That realization stung, but it also warmed her. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice quiet but steady. "You probably think I'm crazy, just showing up here like this. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I didn't want you to feel alone today." Claire blinked. His words landed heavier than he probably intended. Alone. Yes, that was the word she had been avoiding for months, maybe years. She had told herself she was independent, that she liked her space, her quiet evenings. But deep down, the silence of her home had begun to feel less like peace and more like emptiness. Her throat tightened slightly, but she forced a small smile. "That's thoughtful of you," she said carefully. "But still, next time, knock until I actually answer." He grinned, nodding quickly. "Deal." The tension between them eased, replaced by a softer energy. Conversation flowed more easily after that. They talked about the neighborhood, the bakery, the weather that had turned bitterly cold overnight. Claire found herself laughing at his little jokes, the kind she would normally brush off. She noticed the way his eyes lit up when she laughed, like her smile mattered more than the food or the morning itself. At one point, Daniel leaned back in his chair and studied her for a moment. "You know," he said, his tone quieter now, "you don't let people in very easily." Claire blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" He shrugged, looking a little embarrassed at his own boldness. "I mean, you're kind. You're friendly. But you always keep a little distance, like there's this invisible wall around you. I've always wondered why." Her breath hitched. The words were too close to the truth, too raw. She wanted to deny it, laugh it off, but she couldn't. Instead, she stared down at her coffee, her fingers tightening around the mug. "Maybe I've had reasons," she said finally. Her voice low. Daniel didn't press her. He simply nodded, as if to say he understood without needing the details. And that simple act, his restraint, his patience, moved her more than any question or insistence would have. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, full of things unsaid. Claire felt her heart race in a way it hadn't in years, not with anger, not with fear, but with something she barely recognized. Hope. She lifted her eyes to him again, and their gazes locked. For a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of them, the table between them, the warm coffee, and the unspoken possibilities hanging in the air. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Then, almost as if sensing her thoughts, Daniel broke the tension with a small smile. "I should probably get going soon. I've already disrupted your whole morning." Something inside her clenched at his words. The thought of him leaving, of the house returning to its quiet emptiness, suddenly felt unbearable. She didn't know why the idea hit her so hard, but it did. "No," she said quickly, surprising even herself. "Stay a little longer." Daniel's eyebrows rose, but then his expression softened into something warm, something that made her chest tighten. He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll stay." They lingered over their breakfast, the minutes stretching into an hour. Claire found herself telling him things she hadn't shared with anyone in a long time, little details about her work, her favorite books, her memories of Christmas mornings when her son was small. Daniel listened closely, never interrupting, his eyes always steady on hers. She felt seen, really seen, in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. And then, just when she thought the moment couldn't grow any deeper, Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice softer than before. "Claire, I need to be honest. I didn't just come here because of the pastries. I came because I wanted to see you." Her breath caught. The words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. She opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of a car door slamming outside made her freeze. Both of them turned toward the window. A neighbor was walking past, bundled in a coat, completely unaware of the charged moment inside the house. Still, it broke the spell. Claire looked back at Daniel, her heart racing, her thoughts a jumble. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to admit the strange flutter she had been feeling since she saw him in her kitchen. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she whispered, "This morning, it feels different, like something's changing." Daniel's eyes softened, and he gave a small nod. "Maybe it is." The silence that followed was thick with meaning, with everything neither of them dared to say out loud. And in that moment, Claire knew one thing for certain: whatever path lay ahead, nothing would ever be quite the same again.